And welcome back to the last segment of today's show on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you guys have enjoyed the show this far. We are switching back to the QB, but this time to the losers in terms of the strength of schedule battle and debate at the QB position. Now, when I look at this list, there's a lot of talent on this list, but a lot of guys who are in pivotal years, whether it be in contract situations or in new homes, that really have to prove themselves, and the schedules aren't benefiting them. That being said, I don't see any reason as to why you should shy away from them in fantasy outside of the fact that their schedules might not favor them doing as well as we think. So without further ado, let's jump right into the biggest losers in the strength and schedule debate for the quarterbacks. Now, when I talk about QBs in certain situations, now is the time for a lot of these teams who are in playoff contention but really haven't gotten over the hump to reevaluate the quarterbacks that they picked up, say, at the start of the decade, let's say in 2020. Because now all these rookie deals are up, and these guys are signing big deals. And all of these deals are predicated on the future goings-on of the franchise. So how we view them is going to come from their play. And I think that all of these guys kind of transcend schedule because all of them have different traits that really stand out and say, well, maybe we should reconsider what we think about strength of schedule and how important it is. Because if you're in a contract year and you want to prove that they made the right decision, that motivates you, regardless of who you play. And so all three of these guys are in situations where they're fighting to prove themselves. And that will stand for more in the future than any other aspects of what they do. So without further ado, let's jump right into them. Let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa for a little bit. Because Tua Tagovailoa is perhaps the most controversial quarterback in the league. Whether you think that Tyreek Hill really elevated his game and not the other way around, or if you think about him as someone who's failing to live up to certain moments, or if you really believe that he's the guy going forward for the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa is definitely going to be a name that comes up a lot, not just in real life, but fantasy football. He's a big money man now. He got the big contract. The Dolphins truly believed in him, decided to sign him up for a couple more years. But the telling things about Tua Tagovailoa are, how comfortable is he when all of those things could be taken away from him? The big question mark going in for this offense, outside of anything related to injury histories of both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, lie in the O-line. You lose guys like Robert Hunt, you potentially lose Connor Williams, and so I'm looking at the line in front of Tua, and that's a huge concern because Tua is someone who wants to pick and choose his spots. He's not necessarily someone predicated on running with the football. Another interesting stat that might be a quote-unquote nail in the coffin for some of you who are on the fence about Tua is that over the past 3 seasons, he's failed to average 22 or more fantasy points in any of them. And so that could lead to a little bit of concern for those who might have taken a flyer on Tua. To top it all off, the NFC West is the division he's playing this year. And that's always a tough division to play because each and every single one of those teams always are competitive. That being said, though, I'm not losing hope in Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously, if we go based on the future, perhaps in the future Tua Tagovailoa is not going to be the quarterback we think he was. Perhaps when we look back on the 4-year span to come for Tua and say 2030, it might not be what people expect from him. But he still has the weapons to get things done. He still has enough talent in the tank to really be someone who you should look out for. And overall, the bottom line is, out of all these quarterbacks who are kind of in this middle tier, signing new deals, Tua certainly isn't the worst. He's not necessarily, Joe Burrow, who's already gotten to the Super Bowl and already beaten Patrick Mahomes, which is always the watermark for a quarterback in the AFC. But he certainly isn't the worst. And I feel like a lot of things centered around Tua have stemmed from just circumstances that really have not been his fault. The concussions, the cold weather, I don't necessarily blame those on Tua. So he definitely has traits there, talent there that will really help him as the years go on. It's just all about, doing it right. Compared to this next guy who I'm going to talk about, is definitely an interesting debate. Trevor Lawrence is definitely someone who I feel like when we look back on a lot more highly. A former number 1 overall pick who hasn't really lived up to those expectations as of yet. Also a big money man now. The Jaguars believed in him. So, in that debate, I feel like, as of right now, Tua has the most tools going forward to be the more successful QB. But Trevor Lawrence seems to have the better potential future. Because, as of this moment, Trevor Lawrence is being paid like a high-end quarterback, and he knows that he can be better. That should be incentive for him to get better. He has a much weaker wide receiver room than Tua, but I feel like he has more of a chance to elevate them than Tua does because Tua has a weapon who, let's be honest here, anyone can really throw to. I can't see the same for Trevor Lawrence. And the bottom line is, even with the second worst schedule in the league, Trevor Lawrence should have a bounce-back season. He should regress to the mean. He should find ways to really build upon what makes him a true kind of raw potential kind of player. And he actually has a lot of prove-it games this season. He plays Tua and the Dolphins. He plays the Browns, the Bills, and the Texans. Those are prove-it games. And so, both of those quarterbacks, if we had to pick between both of them, I would say Trevor Lawrence is the guy you go with. But who knows what the future holds. And who knows how long that the Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle triumvirate is going to stay in Miami. So, when I look at these, let's forget the strength of schedule. When I look at these quarterbacks side by side, I have to answer the question of which one of them will succeed, more likely to succeed. It's going to be, I feel like, Tua. But when I think about guys who have longevity written all over them, then that's Trevor Lawrence. So I think the question for fantasy football managers, especially this season, is that which one of them is ready to take that leap? Which one of them do you feel more comfortable taking a flyer on? If all the quarterbacks with easy schedules or guys that you really like are gone, and you're staring at that duopoly of Tua and Trevor, which guy do you feel will take that leap? Because it's going to come to that, I think. It's going to come to trying to find a guy who fits what you want. And the last quarterback on this list is Russell Wilson. Let's talk about him a little bit. Let's talk about why he is not as coveted as other teams, why the Pittsburgh Steelers only signed him for 1 year. We're going to talk about him a lot in this show the next couple of weeks. And he's a guy who maybe past his prime, but when I think about him in relation to the Steelers, he's certainly someone who offers them a lot more than what you might realize. They've never really had a deep ball threat. Even Ben Roethlisberger wasn't that big of a deep ball threat. And Russell Wilson is that. Second hardest schedule, though. He plays in the AFC North. He plays the Ravens twice a year. He plays the Browns twice a year with that defense. And he plays the Bengals. So, let's start off with that factor. Is Russell Wilson a guy who can still compete? If so, just take the chance on him. But I think Justin Fields offers more. And so, that really hinders the development of the whole Russell Wilson storyline as a guy who I still think can compete. When I look at all three of these guys, the reason why I think that all of these guys are in weird circumstances is because Tua and Trevor are in the points of their career where they really need to step up, and Russell Wilson's in a point of his career where he's kind of over the hill a little bit. And so those three guys, without looking at strength of schedule, are in really weird places. And so it's up to you to determine which of these guys is going to take the next step and which of these guys still has in the tank to get going. But I should just about do it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. I've been Christopher Shepard. This has been the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. Remember, like, follow, and subscribe to the show on the network. Consider leaving a tip or donation at the link gsmc.cloud. Thank you guys yet again. We'll be back tomorrow, better than ever, with another edition of the show.